Welcome to 12-Week Relationships, the podcast, the platform, the everything. My name is Pye. This is my good friend and co-host, Glen. I should say Dr. Glen.
How's it going?
Dr. Glen.
Hello, Pye. How are you?
Dr. Glen, you bring the legitimacy that is sorely needed to this platform.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in this first episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is 12-Week Relationships, what you can expect from the platform and the podcast. And then we're going to get into kind of introducing it, talking through a little bit about what brought us to this spot. So number one, as it sounds, this is a podcast for relationships. But that doesn't just mean romantic relationships. I mean, we're going to be talking about every aspect of relationships. So from your friends to family to business partnerships to romantic relationships and yes, to marriage. This all plays a huge part in our lives. And we wanted to talk about it. Specifically, want to talk about how to make relationships better.
Yeah, because once again, you said it influences every single aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's wild to me thinking about that, because I would say from your own personal happiness through to your business success, the different jobs that you find, I mean, everything, your own personal fulfillment, so much of this hinges on your relationships. And yet it's not a part of our formal education.
Yeah, we were talking about that, right? You learn math, you learn geography, but you don't learn how to manage your anger, how to manage fear.
Important.
Right? Learning how to socialize, how to engage and cultivate relationships, because that's just as important in business and in life to succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, one of my big pieces of motivation, my impetus for this, for the book, for everything, has been the fact that I feel like traditional schooling has failed us in so many ways. At least it's failed me personally, not to knock on it, but to say that like geography is great.
Yeah.
But I've never been challenged to like draw a map. And if I have, it was for fun. It wasn't like, you got to do this.
Yes.
I took a class on volcanoes and earthquakes. I mean, I have so much ridiculous, useless information in my head. But when it came down to how do you respond to a friend that takes advantage of you?
Yeah.
How do you respond to somebody that cuts you off, that makes you mad, that triggers you?
Yeah.
No knowledge, no information.
And outside of the generic language of, let's set boundaries. Well, how exactly do you do that, right?
Yeah.
So all of that is not taught.
So that was the initial kind of impetus for this. The other side of this is having gone through traditional therapy and counseling. Both of us have come to a place, you clinically through the system, me through experiencing it firsthand and through the case studies where we've realized traditional therapy is broken.
It is broken. And I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I was in the clinical field 20 years, trained by a clinical psychiatrist. So, the medical model was my personal Bible.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it was relationships, whether it was like a mental health diagnosis, it was all about symptom management. And the core of the medical model in this medical field is maintaining. And the goal is you don't strike too high, because if you can, it's going to cause chaos. You don't want them to get too low. It's just this middle ground of just maintenance. And I feel like that's translated when it comes to relationship counseling, because it's always about maintenance.
Symptom management and maintenance.
Symptom management and maintenance, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
That is a wild notion to think. So we're going to talk about what led us to create 12-Week Relationships, but the entire premise of 12-Week Relationships and the company that we created behind it, TWR Institute, is better relationships in weeks, not years.
Yes.
Meaning we want to take a scientific approach to relationship information, to actually studying and implementing and creating models and frameworks. But if those models are not simple enough that you can make improvements within a short period of time, I genuinely believe they should not be implemented. If it's not easy enough that you can't see an improvement within weeks, we shouldn't be doing it.
I agree.
So this idea of the average couple spending $50,000, and I'm way over that, by the way, $50,000 in 5 years.
In 5 years, yeah.
To end up in the exact same place, because clinically, traditional counseling has about a 25% effective rate of actually creating long-term positive change.
Well, I mean, out of all the psychotherapies, it's the lowest rated in terms of efficacy.
Correct.
Yeah, because you're dealing with two people. And, we're going to cover a lot of this, but it deals with, there's a lack of individual accountability, like what you brought into the relationship and just all the other different factors that you have to address.
Yeah. And it's not like I don't want, so I'm coming at this from this this is going to be a fun podcast because I have my academic Dr. Glen Hong over here, who I'm going to call you every time you get like overly professor-like. I'm going to be like, bring it back to earth, buddy.
All right, man, I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Yeah.
On this side, I just have practical information, research, and just no BS. Like I just can't handle the BS that's brought to the table in this field. And there, it's not to say that the field itself is bad or that the counselors are not good. It's to say that it's new. I mean, this entire industry, you compare this to like carpentry or engineering or anything else that's been around thousands of years. We're talking psychotherapies have been around what, 100, 150?
Yeah, about that, if that, yeah.
That's a baby.
It is a baby. Well, even just in the medical field, I mean, now they're including more holistic things. So it's just an evolving process.
Correct.
Yeah.
And yet so often I don't feel like therapists treat it as an evolving process. They treat it, what they have as absolutes.
Well, the other thing too is like you mentioned the learning, right? You learn geography, you learn math. In the schools, you learn concepts, but the actual implementation, the nuance, the details that are involved, a lot of that is missing a lot of times. So I think, the ability to teach how to make a relationship work is missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here. Better relationships in weeks, not years.
Yeah.
And honestly, for podcast listeners, we wanted to take kind of the exact same approach. Instead of just doing interviews and open-ended conversations nonstop, I have you as my permanent co-host. We're going to be coming on here. Each episode is going to be topic-centered. So when you guys listen, we want to actually value that time by giving you takeaways that you can implement right away into your own personal lives, whether it's your friendships, your family relationships, business, marriage, any of those things.
Yeah.
I'd love to know, I've told you this before, of all the doctors, professors that I've met in this space, you've been, well, the only one that I know that's been very open-minded and understanding of the fact that, hey, there should be room for something new. What was your experience that led you to this process? When did you come to realize that I don't know all of it?
Well, once again, going back to the whole medical model concept, when I was working with a psychiatrist, there was one client who came in and he was like, basically, my dream is to actually become a psychologist. And then he was working as an accountant, right? So, the psychiatrist that I was trained with, he was by the book, a medical model book, maintenance, right? So when he went and saw him because he was having depressive symptoms, what do you think that psychiatrist told him? My dream is to go into psychology. What do you think this guy told him?
Not to.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Lower your expectations. Take these medications and then exercise more. And then that was a treatment plan because from a medical perspective, you're reaching too high. And then for you to stretch that far, that may cause more emotional turmoil, right? And
that's the exact same guidance, by the way, that was given to my father.
Yeah.
When he said to his doctor,
I
have anxiety and these things make me anxious. The doctor said, take this medicine and avoid those situations.
And maintenance, right? And then even like when I was like, I'll share more about like the things that happened to me, but it was always, the treatment model was maintenance. And I would really believe that and try to incorporate that. But then eventually I realized it's not about maintenance and it's about stretching. It's going beyond what you think you can do, learning about yourself, mentally and emotionally expanding. And that's where you start to figure things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that come for you with your own marriage? Because that was something that was unique to me.
Yeah, because it made me go deep. Because, usually I would be like, hey, I'll challenge this person and they'll back down. My wife did not back down. Right. So it was like, okay, I have to think of something else. Right. So we both had to learn to mentally and emotionally stretch. We went to counselors. We tried the traditional models and it wasn't working. And ultimately it became, like you, this self-exploration, trying to figure it out. Like you had your SSR method. And it just, what we're trying to do is trying to heal what we brought into the marriage individually, support each other. But then where you came in was you gave us an avenue of how to be happier. And no one's ever offered that to me, whether in doctorate program, master's program, internships, you were the first person to say, this is what you actually need to look for to have a happy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, one of the things, I appreciate you saying that, but I'll pay you your $20 later.
Yeah, I want it now, man. That's good.
So the thing to me though is wild is, yeah, I have a similar experience with that, of going to the professionals and not knowing what to do. But you were a professional. You were clinically trained. You're a doctor. And you're telling me that you didn't have the answers for your own relationship.
I didn't. I mean, I could read the research, trust. Okay, let's increase trust. But how do you do that?
Yeah.
Right? Or the tool sets, like the tool sets of like I statements. Let's take turns. All of that it would temporarily reduce symptoms, but it never addressed our root issues.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is what brought you to Upside Down. Upside Down is your latest book.
Yeah, it's my latest book. And basically we were able to use each other's triggers, because we were triggering each other to heal our wounds, to become better partners and better people. And then this is where you came in, where you provided us a model to actually have a really happy and healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to it a little bit, and this is the premise of this podcast, is how do you fix a relationship when the professionals can't help you? Because that is exactly where I got to 13 years in that process, when that counselor told me, you've read everything, I can't help you. I don't know how to fix your marriage. Give me some time. And on my drive home, I thought, this is insane. Not a single counselor has been able to answer such a basic question. I started asking this question to every single therapist, coach, counselor, spiritual advisor. Just tell me what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah.
That's all I want to know.
Yeah.
I don't even have the basics. And everyone would give me, well, either it's complicated, or they would boil it down to these simple anecdotal principles. And I'm talking to professionals too. Oh, it's about communication.
Yes.
And I would call them out on it. That's bullshit. You cannot say that a happy marriage is just about communication.
Yeah.
What if you take away everything else? You take away the ability to have interest and similar values, and you take away the growth and the enjoyment of the relationship, and you just are good communicators. You're telling me that's what it takes? And they wouldn't have a response. They would say things like, oh, well, it's complicated. It takes more than that. Why does it need to be this complicated?
Yeah.
So after that last one, I was driving home, sitting in traffic going, I developed frameworks my entire life. I've made frameworks to teach people things that were impossible. You can't learn a language when you're older. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I created frameworks on how you can learn Cantonese and Mandarin that help people to become fluent. No accent whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then I proved it by doing it myself.
That's insane.
And then you can't be a professional photographer if you're not born creative. So I create frameworks on teaching creativity. I create frameworks on the business of running a studio, on sales, on lighting, on every aspect of what you couldn't inherently teach.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer that you're not born with any of these things. I mean, there's the 0.01% people that have some sort of genetic insanity that lets them become a LeBron James,
the geniuses,
or the crazy artist, or the crazy.
Sure.
But for the rest of us, we're given the same, essentially, palette.
Yeah.
And it's a learning process.
Yeah. And then basically relationships, they follow similar frameworks. People are different, but basically there's certain things that need to be in place to make relationships work.
And that's exactly what I thought. On this drive home, I'll bet I can figure out a framework on what healthy relationships look like. That's it.
But you should tell them what he told you. What did he specifically tell you? Remember?
I mean, he literally said, you've read all the books on my shelf. I can't help you. I don't know. And then he said, give me some time, which he never called back.
Yeah.
So when I was driving home, I kind of also realized I'd been shooting weddings for 4 or 5 years at that point. And I'm like, I think I also have the laboratory that I need to test this framework.
Yeah.
This weird thing happens when you pick up a camera. When you pick up a camera and you've gained your client's trust, you get this passport into their lives. It's not like we're sitting down in a counselor's office and the counselor's holding a clipboard writing notes. In that situation, couples will present the version of themselves that they feel comfortable presenting. In front of my camera, they were themselves with their friends, with each other, with their families, and I could just observe. So through 500 of these case studies of observation, and through what I had in terms of my knowledge of all the books that I'd read, I put together a framework.
Yeah.
all it is this is a roadmap. It's just how a healthy relationship should function. And my thesis was simple. It's all the same. You look at a friendship, you look at a marriage, it's the same. You look at a business partnership, it's the same. The only difference is intensity of that relationship.
Yeah.
So I have this book that is unreleased.
But
You have this
will
book.
be released soon, though.
Yes. At some point.
Yes.
But now I have another problem. And it's, I have nothing on paper that says I should be talking about this. I mean, I've been a wedding photographer and educator in the space of photography for 10 years. I have no credentials to back up however good the research is, however good the framework is, there's nothing to back it up. So I have this book that's done and I show it to my partners and well, it's great and everything, but you're not a relationship expert. I take it to agents. Well, it's great and everything, but the millions of people that follow you, it doesn't have anything to do with relationships or anything like that. It's photography. So I'm stonewalled everywhere I go. And I don't know what the next step is. And this is what's super interesting about this, because this is when you ran into Justin.
Yes.
Like 3-4 months ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the street.
Maybe it was 6 months ago at this point. Like, time's flying so fast.
Yeah, half a year. It's been
Was it
half a year now. Yeah, yeah.
How did this happen?
So I was walking on the opposite side of the street, and he's like, "Hey," while I was jogging, and I was like, "Hey," and he's like, "Come here." And then I walk over there, and he introduces himself. He says his name is Justin, and he's like, "What do you do?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm a professor full time, and then I was a clinical psychologist." And then he was like, I'm just having a book come out pretty soon. And he's like, "Oh my, one of my best friends, Pye, he's publishing a book, right?" And he's like, "You should meet him." And then he introduces me to his wife, his kids. I meet all of them. He's all, "Give me your number. Let's get together." So he puts us on a group text, right?
Yeah.
And then we're like, "Yeah, let's get together." And then we eventually planned it out. We met at your house for the UFC event. But it was just me and you. He didn't show up.
Yeah. A week later, we're
Yeah.
sitting there watching a
Yeah.
UFC fight at my place.
Yeah.
And I'm going, "How long have you known Justin?" And you were like, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah. I know.
I was going, so Justin just like set this whole thing up and he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And we start getting to know each other. You tell me about the work that you're doing. And immediately I start thinking about all the other counselors and psychologists that I've known in my life. And I start getting a bit of a bias going on. But as you start telling about what it is that you do, I thought it was kind of interesting. And then I told you about what I do. When you left, I gave you the copy of the book.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
I really liked it. I mean, I know you keep talking about credentials, but to me, what gave it credentials was the authenticity, the nuance, and the detail that was in that book.
I appreciate
So regardless of like titles, ultimately, some of the best healers are people like, credentials or not, they just have a roadmap like which you have to help people get better.
For
And
sure.
ultimately, that is the ultimate credential.
Eventually.
Yeah.
The piece of paper helps at the beginning.
At the
when
beginning,
you're trying to figure
it
out.
looks nice. It's a shiny
Yeah.
car, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, can you deliver or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You called me a few days later and, you texted me and said this was something very special. It's going to change a lot of people's lives. And I kind of thought you were being nice. And then it was like a week later, you're like, "I've read the book 3 times. We need to, talk more about this."
Because it tied in the things that I was interested in, and it also provided the piece that I felt that was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I learned a little more about your book. And specifically, see, in my book, my only goal is to just show people what a healthy relationship should look like. Any kind of relationship. It's just a roadmap. And I specifically state that I can't help you deal with trauma, your past experiences, these things that are just, you need professional help. The tough thing is that I've gone through the professional process, and I know that sometimes can and might not help. But you need guidance.
Sure.
This book is not for that.
Sure.
I said, "Glenn, I'm going to hire you to do what you do with me," because your book wasn't quite out yet.
Yeah.
I couldn't just grab it.
Yeah.
So I actually hired you for 10 sessions. Wasn't it 10 sessions?
10 sessions.
I paid the full price. No, there was no friendship discount.
No friendship discount at that time.
So then sitting down with you, I quickly realized this is not what I'm used to. This is not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And your approach, your book is called Upside Down because you take a backwards approach to triggers. One of my most frustrating things in counseling was reaching these points where, the person next to me, and I'd seen it happen in so many different people's cases, where the person next to you is being irrationally triggered by something you're doing, but it's no fault of your own, but you're the one that's being asked to change it.
Yes.
So that person's triggered, and their response is, you got to stop doing what you're doing.
Yes. And so the whole upside down model is when you point the finger, 3 fingers point back at you. You have to be accountable.
First time I liked that cliche.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You have to be accountable. And when you're triggered, so once again, traditional counseling will say you're being irrational.
Yes.
When your emotions go beyond your ability to think, this is not rational, just calm down. Versus there's a pain there that you can work through, and this relationship is helping you. It's bringing it to the surface. You can fix yourself, and you can also fix your partner.
Yes.
Yes.
That was the piece for me that was huge, because it was not looking outward to control your environment. It was looking inward to actually control the stimulus, the thing that's causing the issue.
Accountability first on each partner, and then you come to the table with your partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, we began to start realizing what we had here, because with my book, we had this roadmap for how a healthy relationship should function. And with You're Upside Down, and specifically, you have a process called 3T, trauma triggered therapy.
Yes.
We're able to basically use this roadmap to spell out what this should be. And as we encounter different issues along the way, we're able to go backwards using trauma triggered therapy to resolve issues, and forwards as we create a guide of where we're going in this whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, it gives an assessment of your background, your family history, your relationship history, and it gives you insight into why you chose the partner that you chose, the person that you're with at that moment, and then the roadmap to make it what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the first moment for you where you felt like we had something special?
To be honest, like when we were doing the coaching together, so you came in, and then you also showed me the book. And then at the same time, like I was understanding you. It was weird because I was reading your material, and then during the coaching sessions, I really started to see what you were about and what you were trying to accomplish. And that's when I was like, oh my God. And then remember, even during the sessions, I'd bring stuff up, and you'd be like, I don't know about that, right? You'd be like, oh, I'm not sure about that one, right? So the whole process in total, like, man, it just became like, wow, we have this whole conceptual idea that encapsulates everything that we were, I was trying to solve in my own relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was unique. It was completely different than the traditional model. And it's what ended up with what we now call core value focused therapy.
Core value focused therapy.
So it's an entire methodology on it's not just therapy. This is literally a model that will make the couple, the people standing in front of you, the experts on their own relationships, so they can learn, implement, and stop paying money. Stop coming repeatedly just to manage symptoms.
And they'll have the tool sets after the 12 weeks to be able to do things themselves.
Yes.
Yes. They become their own experts in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this happenstance meeting 6 months ago comes and goes. We go through this process. 3 months later, we're working on this together. 2 months ago, we say, you know what? We're already having people, your students, actually being interested in certifying in something that technically doesn't yet exist. The process exists, but the actual materials that we need, the educational materials, we're like, we have people that want to certify in this that we don't have the system yet. And so this is where Chris and I actually had a conversation. So I was running this other podcast called 12 Week U. And it initially started as Think Stupid Simple. The whole idea was my belief in the university, the schooling structure as it is. I feel like it's failing so many of us in so many different ways, from learning and doing the things that we actually want to be doing. And so it started out as Think Stupid Simple, and eventually I thought, you know what, this needs to be 12 Week U. It needs to be a new format for a university where in 12 weeks it can be something meaningful. You can walk away with a meaningful new life skill. Well, so we're getting ready to relaunch the podcast as 12 Week U, and Chris comes to me and he goes, you have a doctor on board. Dr. Hong, with 20 years of experience, he's a professor at Whittier College. He has the students, and he now has people that actually want to certify along with clients who are ready to go through this. Why don't we pause 12 Week U as a platform and first launch 12 Week Relationships? It's essentially one of the sub, products of 12 Week U. Let's focus in on this. Let's develop this entire thing. And I thought, this is exactly what I want to be doing. This is the first platform that I think we can make the biggest difference on, and I want to get this thing up and running. And so we paused it all. So to those asking what happened to 12 Week U, it's not gone. but we're pausing it. We're pausing it so that we can get this up and going,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back to other topics and bring 12EQ back in other areas, because there's so many valuable areas of life, from business to sales to creativity to all these areas where simple framework can help people to actually take control within a 12-week period. Whereas right now we're kind of just left with the typical university structure, or go to 4 years of
Sure.
this for $100,000, or 5
Yeah.
years of counseling for $50,000.
50,000. Yeah.
So we're here. 12-week relationships is a real thing.
Yep.
And I couldn't be more excited than to be doing this with
I'm
you.
so excited. This has been an amazing experience already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for all those that are listening, if you guys would like to learn more about the 12-week relationship process, you guys can go to 12weekrelationships.com, where you can reach out. You can even get a 15-minute free consult with Glenn. And in the meantime, we'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast. We want to see you guys back here, same time, at same place next week. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us. There are a million places that you guys could listen to podcasts, watch TV, all of it. So we're honored that you guys are spending your time with us. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Peace.